Billionaire fired the cleaning lady. She returned as the hospital owner and destroyed him. You moved my paperweight. Those 3 words. That's all it took to end my life. I stood there in my oversized cleaning uniform, my hands still wet from scrubbing his imported marble floors, and I looked at this man, this billionaire in his $15,000 suit, and I watched his face twist with disgust like I had committed some unforgivable sin. You moved my paperweight, he repeated, holding up this ridiculous crystal thing shaped like a DNA helix. Do you have any idea how much this costs? Do you have any idea how specific my organizational system is? I remember my voice shaking. I'm sorry, Mr. Ashcroft. I was dusting your desk. I'll put it back exactly where it was. You're right, he said, and for a moment I thought he was showing mercy. You will put it back, and then you'll leave. You're fired. Sir, please, I have a sick mother. I need this job. It was an honest mistake. He looked at me like I was something stuck to the bottom of his shoe. Your problems are not my concern. You're replaceable. There are 1,000 people who would kill for your job and actually do it correctly. That was 3 years ago. 3 years ago, Veyron Ashcroft threw me out of his building like garbage because I moved a paperweight 2 inches to the left while cleaning his office. What he didn't know was that I wasn't just some cleaning lady. I was Dr. Seraphine DeVaris, Johns Hopkins Medical School, Wharton MBA, former chief operating officer of a multi-million-dollar healthcare network. And what he really didn't know was that his cruelty would be the spark that burned his entire empire to the ground. My name is Seraphine DeVaris, and this is the story of how a billionaire's arrogance destroyed him, and how the invisible woman he threw away became the architect of his complete annihilation. Now, before I take you through this journey, let me say something. If you're the type of person who thinks it's okay to treat people beneath you like they're invisible, if you think janitors and cashiers and servers don't deserve your respect, you should probably stop watching right now, because what I'm about to share is going to make you very uncomfortable. But if you've ever been dismissed, underestimated, or thrown away like you didn't matter, stay with me. Hit that subscribe button, because this story is your blueprint. And trust me, you're going to need it. Let me take you back to where it all began. Chicago, Illinois, winter of 2021. I stood outside Veyron Industries headquarters every evening at 6:30, waiting for the service entrance to open. The building was a monument to excess. 70 stories of steel and glass towering over the Chicago River. Inside, Veyron Ashcroft ran his pharmaceutical distribution empire, controlling drug supplies to hundreds of hospitals across Illinois, Texas, and New York. His company was the middleman between manufacturers and healthcare facilities, and he had turned that position into a goldmine by doing something very simple and very evil. He artificially inflated prices. He created fake shortages. He held hospitals hostage. A cancer medication that cost $3 to manufacture. He sold it for $300. Insulin that cost $5 to produce? $400 to the patient. People died because of his greed, but at the time, I didn't know the full extent of it. I just knew he was rich, powerful, and untouchable, and I was nobody. I clocked in every night at 7. My supervisor, a tired woman named Gladys who had been cleaning offices for 23 years, handed me my cart. Supplies, trash bags, industrial strength cleaning solutions that made my hands crack and bleed. Keep your head down, she told me on my first day. Don't make eye contact with the executives. Don't speak unless spoken to. And for God's sake, don't touch anything on their desks. I nodded. I understood. Because 3 years earlier, I had been on the other side. I had been the executive walking past the cleaning staff without seeing them. I had been the person in the expensive suits making decisions that affected thousands of lives. And then I lost everything. The fall from grace wasn't slow, it was instantaneous. One day, I was Dr. Seraphine Davaris, rising star in healthcare administration. The next day, I was a defendant in a malpractice lawsuit that would destroy everything my family had built. The lawsuit was a lie, a fabrication created by a colleague who wanted my position, and a legal team that didn't care about truth. They claimed I had authorized a surgical procedure that resulted in a patient's death. They had forged documents, falsified records, paid off witnesses. I fought it. God, I fought it with everything I had. But the legal fees drained my family's resources. The scandal made headlines. Our healthcare network's reputation crumbled. Insurance companies pulled out. Investors fled. Within 8 months, my family's 3 hospitals in New York were seized and sold to pay settlements for a crime I didn't commit. My father, who had built that network from nothing, who had dedicated his entire life to serving underserved communities, had a massive heart attack 2 weeks after we lost the last hospital. He died in my arms. My mother, who had been my father's partner in everything, retreated into herself. She stopped speaking, stopped eating. Within 6 months, she developed early-onset dementia, accelerated by grief and trauma. I placed her in a nursing facility, not a good one. The kind of place where the staff is overworked and underpaid, where patients sit in wheelchairs in hallways because there aren't enough rooms, where the smell of disinfectant can't quite cover the smell of neglect. It was all I could afford. I had lost my medical license during the legal battle. My reputation was destroyed. No hospital would hire me, no clinic would take my calls. I had 2 master's degrees and couldn't get a job answering phones. So I ran. I left New York and came to Chicago with $700 and a duffel bag of clothes. I took the first job I could get, cleaning offices at night for $13 an hour. And every evening, as I pushed my cart through those gleaming corridors of power, I disappeared. I became invisible. Just another woman in a uniform that smelled like bleach and broken dreams. The executives walked past me like I was furniture. They had conversations about million-dollar deals while I emptied their trash cans. They laughed about their vacation homes while I scrubbed their toilets. I told myself it was temporary. Just until I figured out my next move. Just until I saved enough to get my mother into a better facility. I told myself a lot of lies back then. The truth was, I had given up. I had accepted that this was my life now, that I would spend the rest of my days invisible, forgotten, erased. And then I met Veyron Ashcroft, and everything changed. The night shift at Veyron Industries started at 7 and ended at 3 in the morning. 8 hours of cleaning, 70 floors of corporate excess. I usually started on the executive level. 57th floor, where the air smelled like expensive cologne and fresh leather, where the carpets were so thick your feet sank into them, where every piece of furniture cost more than I made in 6 months. There were 12 of us on the cleaning crew. Gladys, who supervised. Maria, a woman from Guatemala who sent every paycheck back to her 3 kids. James, a guy in his 60s who had been a factory worker until the plant closed. Lynn, a nursing student working nights to pay tuition. Curtis, a single father with twin girls. We all had stories. We all had lives that the people who worked in this building would never know about and would never care to know about. Keep moving, Gladys would say. The faster we work, the faster we go home. I learned the rhythm quickly. Vacuum the corridors, empty the trash, wipe down the desks, clean the windows, scrub the bathrooms, restock the break rooms. Don't think, don't feel, just move. But sometimes, late at night when the building was empty and silent, I would stand in those executive offices and remember. I remembered what it felt like to make decisions that mattered, to save lives, to build something meaningful. I had graduated from Johns Hopkins at the top of my class. I did my residency at Massachusetts General. I got my MBA from Wharton while working full-time. By 30, I was the chief operating officer of Davris Medical Group, the network my grandfather started in 1978. We ran 3 community hospitals in underserved areas of New York. We treated patients regardless of their ability to pay. We fought insurance companies to get people the care they needed. My father used to say, "Medicine is not a business, Sarah, it's a calling. The moment you prioritize profit over patients, you've lost your soul." I believed that. I lived that. Until Marcus Thorne decided he wanted my job. Marcus was the chief financial officer. Brilliant with numbers. Terrible with ethics. He saw our hospitals as assets to be maximized, not communities to be served. He wanted to cut services to low-income patients, wanted to reject Medicaid cases, wanted to turn us into just another corporate healthcare machine. I blocked him at every turn, so he destroyed me. The malpractice case he fabricated was elegant in its cruelty. He chose a patient who had died from complications that had nothing to do with any decision I made, but he forged authorization documents with my signature. He paid off a nurse to testify that I had pressured the surgical team. He worked with a lawyer who specialized in medical malpractice settlements. I never stood a chance. The media loved the story. Young female executive accused of negligence resulting in death. It had everything. The case went to trial. My lawyers were good, but Marcus's were better. The jury found the hospital liable. The settlement was catastrophic. Our malpractice insurance covered part of it, but not enough. We had to liquidate assets, sell equipment, lay off staff. And then the other lawsuits started. Patients we had treated years ago suddenly came forward with claims, all of them represented by the same law firm, all of them with suspicious timing. We were being systematically destroyed. My father fought until his heart gave out. My mother's mind broke under the weight of watching everything we built crumble, and I ran. I ran because I couldn't face what I had lost. I ran because every time I closed my eyes I saw my father's face as the paramedics worked on him. I ran because staying in New York meant drowning in the ruins of my old life. Chicago was supposed to be a fresh start. Instead, it was just a different kind of ending. Maria found me crying in a storage closet one night, about 2 months into the job. I had just gotten off the phone with my mother's nursing facility. They were raising rates again. I was already behind on payments. "Mija," she said softly, sitting down next to me on an overturned bucket. "Whatever it is, it will pass." I shook my head. It won't. Some things don't pass. Some things just break you and leave you broken. She took my hand. Her palms were as rough as mine, scarred from years of hard work. "You're not broken, you're just bent. There's a difference." I wanted to believe her. But sitting in that closet that smelled like ammonia and desperation, wearing a uniform with someone else's name tag because I couldn't afford my own, I felt pretty goddamn broken. The worst part wasn't the work. I didn't mind cleaning. There's a kind of meditation in repetitive physical labor. The worst part was the invisibility. I would stand 3 feet away from executives having conversations, and they would talk about sensitive deals, personal affairs, illegal arrangements like I wasn't even there. One night, I watched a senior vice president berate his assistant until she cried, then turn and walk past me without even registering my existence. Another night, I cleaned the office of a woman who had family photos all over her desk while she screamed into her phone at her daughter, saying the cruelest things I had ever heard a mother say. I saw humanity at its worst because people don't hide who they are in front of invisible people. And Veyron Ashcroft? He was the worst of all of them. I had seen him exactly 3 times before, the night that changed everything. The first time, he walked past me in the corridor while I was changing a trash bag. He was on his phone, talking about a hospital in Texas that was refusing to meet his price increases. "I'm going to cut their supply," he said. "Let's see how long they last when their cancer patients start running out of medication." He said it like he was discussing the weather. The second time, I was cleaning the conference room after a board meeting. He came back for something he had forgotten. I froze, trying to be invisible. He grabbed a folder from the table, looked directly through me like I was glass, and left. The third time, I was restocking paper towels in the executive bathroom. He walked in, saw me, and actually sighed, like my presence was an inconvenience. "Could you hurry up?" he said. "Some of us have work to do." I mumbled an apology and left, my face burning. That was the extent of our interaction before the paperweight incident. I was nothing to him, furniture, scenery, less than human. And that, I would later realize, was his fatal mistake. Because when you treat people like they're invisible, you forget they can see you. And I saw everything. November 14th. I remember the date because it was my father's birthday. He would have been 62. I clocked in at 7. Gladys handed me the assignment sheet. Executive floor. Offices 5700 through 5720. Veyron Ashcroft's office was 5715. He was usually gone by the time we started our shift. The executive floor was supposed to be empty. That was the whole point of the night crew. But that night, his office lights were still on. I hesitated outside his door. Protocol said we skip occupied offices and come back later, but Gladys was strict about staying on schedule. I knocked softly. No answer. I opened the door slowly. "Mr. Ashcroft?" "Cleaning service." Silence. The office was enormous. Floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the Chicago River. A desk the size of my entire apartment. Bookshelves filled with medical journals and pharmaceutical industry publications. Art on the walls that probably cost more than I would make in 10 years. And empty. He must have left the lights on. I rolled my cart in and started the routine. Empty the trash. Wipe down the coffee table. Dust the shelves. His desk was immaculate. Everything arranged with obsessive precision. Laptop exactly centered. Pen holder at a 45-degree angle. Stack of documents perfectly aligned. And in the upper left corner, a crystal paperweight shaped like a DNA double helix. I wiped down the desk carefully, moving things minimally and putting them back exactly where they had been. Or so I thought. I was finishing the windows when I heard the door open behind me. "What are you doing in here?" I spun around. Veyron Ashcroft stood in the doorway, his suit jacket off, tie loosened. He looked exhausted and angry. "I'm so sorry, Mr. Ashcroft." I knocked. There was no answer. "I thought the office was empty. I'll come back later. You're already here. Finish." I nodded and quickly gathered my supplies, trying to be as quick and invisible as possible. "Wait." I froze. He walked past me to his desk. Stood there for a long moment, staring at it. Then he picked up the crystal paperweight. "Did you move this?" My heart started pounding. I may have moved it to dust underneath. I put it back exactly where it was. "No," he said quietly. "You didn't." He held it up, examining it like it was evidence in a crime scene. "This paperweight sits on the left corner of my desk, precisely 1 inch from each edge, with the helix spiral facing toward the door. You placed it 2 inches from the edge, and you rotated it 45 degrees. I stared at him. I couldn't tell if he was serious. "Mr. Ashcroft, I sincerely apologize. I'll remember the exact placement for next time. There won't be a next time." The way he said it made my blood run cold. "I'm sorry." You moved something on my desk. You disrupted my organizational system. That demonstrates a fundamental lack of attention to detail." He set the paperweight down, adjusting it with minute precision. "I don't tolerate incompetence. It was a paperweight. I was cleaning your office. I didn't think." "That's exactly the problem. You didn't think." He turned to face me fully for the first time. "Do you know how much this costs?" "I don't, sir. $3,200. It was a gift from the CEO of the largest pharmaceutical manufacturer in North America. It represents the foundation of modern medicine, the discovery of DNA structure, and you handled it like it was a toy. I apologize, Mr. Ashcroft. It won't happen again." "You're absolutely right," he said. "It won't, because you're fired." The word hit me like a physical blow. "What? You're terminated, effective immediately." He walked to his phone and pressed a button. "Security, I need someone on the executive floor to escort a staff member out of the building." "Please," I heard myself say. The desperation in my voice was humiliating, but I couldn't stop. "Please, Mr. Ashcroft. I have a sick mother in a nursing facility. I need this job. I made an honest mistake. I'll never touch anything on your desk again. Please." He looked at me, really looked at me, for the first time since I had started working there. And what I saw in his eyes wasn't anger, it was indifference. "Your problems are not my concern," he said. "You're replaceable. There are 1,000 people who would kill for your job and actually do it correctly. Consider this a lesson. Attention to detail matters. Mediocrity has no place in my building." I felt something crack inside my chest. Not break, crack. Like ice developing a fissure. 2 security guards appeared at the door. "Escort this woman out," Veyron said. "Make sure she turns in her badge and any company property." "Sir," I started, but one of the guards put a hand on my elbow. "Ma'am, let's go. Don't make this harder than it needs to be." I let them lead me out. Through the executive floor where my coworkers watched in silent horror. Down the service elevator, through the basement corridors. They didn't even let me get my jacket from my locker. They gave me my final paycheck. $87.32 for the 3 days I had worked that week. And then they walked me out the back entrance, past the dumpsters and loading docks, into the freezing November night. I stood there on the empty street, holding that pathetic check, wearing my cleaning uniform with someone else's name on it. And something happened. The crack inside my chest spread, but instead of breaking me, it revealed something I thought I had lost. Rage. Pure, crystalline, focused rage. Not the hot explosive kind that burns out quickly, the cold kind, the kind that calculates, the kind that waits. Veyron Ashcroft had just made the biggest mistake of his life. He had humiliated someone who had nothing left to lose. And he had no idea who I really was. I sat in my apartment for 3 days. It wasn't much of an apartment. Studio in a building that should have been condemned. Radiator that clanked all night but produced no heat. Windows that didn't quite close. Bathroom with mold creeping up the walls. $450 a month, and I was 2 months behind. The eviction notice was taped to my door. I had until the end of the month. My phone kept ringing, my mother's nursing facility. I didn't answer. I knew what they were calling about. I was 3 weeks behind on payments. They were going to move her to a state facility if I didn't pay. State facilities were where people went to die slowly. I had $87 to my name. No job, no prospects, no way out. I should have felt defeated. Instead, I felt something else. Something dangerous. Clarity. I walked to my closet and pulled down a cardboard box from the top shelf. I hadn't opened it since I moved to Chicago. Hadn't wanted to look at the artifacts of my old life. But now I opened it. Inside were my diplomas. Johns Hopkins, Wharton, awards and certificates, photos of hospital ribbon cuttings, my father shaking hands with the governor, my mother and I at my medical school graduation, and at the very bottom, a business card. Cassian Moretti, Moretti Venture Capital, Healthcare Investments. Cassian had been my father's friend and mentor. He had invested in our hospitals in the early days, had believed in our vision of community-centered healthcare. When the scandal hit, he had tried to help, but I had been too proud, too broken, too ashamed to accept. I had told him I needed to handle it myself, and then I had run away. I stared at that business card for a long time. My hands were shaking. Pride had kept me silent for 3 years. Pride had let me believe that I deserved this punishment, this exile, this invisible life. But sitting in that freezing apartment, holding the final paycheck from a man who had thrown me away like garbage over a paperweight, I realized something. Pride was a luxury I could no longer afford. I picked up my phone. The number rang 4 times. I almost hung up. Moretti Capital, how may I direct your call? Cassian Moretti, please. Tell him it's Seraphine Tavares. A pause. 1 moment. The hold music was classical. Vivaldi. I remembered Cassian always loved Vivaldi. Then his voice, warm, shocked, concerned. Sarah? My God, is that really you? My throat tightened. Hi, Cassian. Where have you been? I've been trying to find you for 3 years. Are you okay? Where are you? Chicago. And no, I'm not okay. Tell me what you need. That's simple. No judgment. No questions about why I had disappeared. Just tell me what you need. I closed my eyes. I need help. I need a second chance. I need to rebuild. There was a pause. Then, come see me tomorrow. I'll send a car. Cassian, I don't have anything. No money, no reputation, nothing to offer you. His voice was firm. You have your mind. You have your training. You have your vision. That's more than enough. Come see me, Sarah. Let's figure this out together. I hung up and cried for the first time in 3 years. Not sad tears, angry tears, determined tears, the kind of tears that watered the seeds of revolution. The next day, a black car picked me up at noon. The driver didn't blink at my address or my clothes. He just opened the door and said, Mr. Moretti is looking forward to seeing you, ma'am. We drove to a cafe in downtown Chicago, the kind of place where coffee costs $12 and everyone is having meetings that will change industries. Cassian was waiting at a corner table. He had aged, silver in his dark hair now, lines around his eyes, but the same sharp intelligence, the same genuine warmth. He stood when he saw me, pulled me into a hug that I didn't realize I desperately needed. Sarah, he said, I'm so glad you called. We sat. He ordered coffee and pastries I didn't touch. Tell me everything, he said. So I did. I told him about the scandal, the destruction of my family, my father's death, my mother's decline, the years of hiding, the cleaning job, the firing, all of it. When I finished, he was quiet for a long moment. Then he said, Do you still believe in the vision? Community health care, patient-centered, accessible, more than ever. Ah, good. Because I've been watching the healthcare industry eat itself alive for the past 3 years. Corporate consolidation, private equity takeovers, hospitals closing in underserved areas, pharmaceutical companies price gouging. He leaned forward. The system is broken, Sarah, and the people who broke it are getting rich off the pieces. I know, I said quietly. What if we fixed it? What if we built something different? My heart started pounding. How? There's a hospital network in Illinois. 3 facilities, all of them failing because they've been mismanaged and bled dry by corporate owners who don't care. They're about to be sold off and shut down. He pulled out a folder. I can get them for almost nothing, but I need someone who knows how to run them, someone who understands that healthcare is about patients, not profits. He slid the folder across the table. Someone like you. I opened it. Financial statements, facility reports, patient demographics. It was a disaster. Outdated equipment, high staff turnover, terrible patient outcomes, crushing debt. It was also opportunity. This is a massive risk, I said. Everything worth doing is, Cassian replied. But here's what I know. You're one of the smartest healthcare administrators I've ever met. You built something beautiful once. You can do it again. I looked up at him. Why are you doing this? After I disappeared, after I ignored your calls, why would you still help me? He smiled. Because your father was my friend. Because I believe in you. And because watching vultures like Veyron Ashcroft destroy healthcare while getting obscenely rich pisses me off. He paused. Do you know who supplies pharmaceuticals to most of the hospitals in this state? My stomach tightened. Veyron Industries. Exactly. He's a middleman who has turned price gouging into an art form. He's the reason insulin costs $400. He's the reason cancer patients have to choose between treatment and bankruptcy. And he does it all legally because the system is rigged in his favor. I thought about Veyron's face as he fired me. The contempt, the casual cruelty. What if we cut him out, I said slowly. What if we negotiated directly with manufacturers? Removed the predatory middleman? Cassian's smile widened. Now you're thinking like the Sarah I remember. I looked down at the folder again, at the opportunity hidden in the ruins. How much time do I have to decide? You already have, he said. I can see it in your eyes. He was right. I had spent 3 years invisible, 3 years beaten down, 3 years believing I deserved my punishment. But I didn't move that paperweight by accident. And Veyron Ashcroft didn't fire me because I was incompetent. He fired me because he could. Because I was invisible to him, because people like me didn't matter in his world. I looked at Cassian and said the words that would change everything. Let's burn his world down and build something better from the ashes. Now, I need you to understand something. What I'm about to tell you is not just a revenge story. This is about every person who has ever been treated like they're worthless by someone with power. If you believe people deserve dignity regardless of their job title, regardless of their bank account, regardless of their current circumstances, I need you to do something for me. Hit that subscribe button right now. Share this video with someone who needs to hear it, because the next part of this story is going to show you that justice, real justice, still exists. And it's going to restore something in you that you thought was broken. Don't just watch, be part of this. Subscribe, share, comment below, and tell me about a time someone underestimated you. Your story matters. And so does what happens next. 18 months. That's how long it took to build an empire from nothing. Let me tell you what 18 months of focused rage looks like. Cassian's investment firm provided $2.3 million in seed capital. I provided something more valuable, a vision, and the willingness to work 100 hours a week to make it real. We closed on the 3 hospitals in January: Mercy General in South Chicago, Lakewood Community Hospital on the west side, Riverside Medical Center in a suburb that had been economically devastated when the manufacturing plants closed. They were disasters. Mercy General had a 32% patient satisfaction rating. Equipment from the 1990s. An emergency room where patients waited an average of 7 hours to be seen. Staff that was burned out and demoralized. Lakewood had been without a permanent chief of medicine for 2 years. Their surgery center was barely functional. They were losing money on every patient they treated. Riverside was on the brink of closure. The previous owners had stripped it for parts, selling off anything valuable and leaving behind a skeleton operation that served a community with nowhere else to go. I stood in the lobby of Mercy General on my first day as CEO and looked at the peeling paint, the broken elevator, the waiting room full of people who had been sitting there for hours. And I got to work, First move. I fired every single administrator who had been part of the previous management structure. The people who had treated these hospitals like cash machines while patients suffered. Second move. I called an all-staff meeting. Doctors, nurses, janitors, cafeteria workers, everyone. 243 people packed into the hospital cafeteria. They looked exhausted, suspicious, beaten down. I stood on a chair so everyone could see me. My name is Dr. Seraphine Davaris, I said. I'm the new CEO, and I'm here to tell you that everything is about to change. Someone in the back laughed, a bitter disbelieving sound. I know you've heard that before, I continued. I know you've been lied to by people in suits who made promises and then disappeared. So, I'm not going to make promises, I'm going to tell you the truth. The room went quiet. This hospital is failing. Patient outcomes are terrible. Satisfaction is in the basement. We're hemorrhaging money. If we don't turn this around in 12 months, we're going to close. And this community will lose the only healthcare facility within 20 miles. I looked around the room. But here's what else is true. You are not the problem. You're working with broken equipment and impossible patient loads and administrators who didn't care if you succeeded or failed. You've been set up to fail, and you showed up anyway. That tells me everything I need to know about your character. A nurse in the front row, a woman probably in her 50s, wiped her eyes. So here's what's going to happen. I'm cutting administrative overhead by 60% and reinvesting that money into staff and equipment. I'm raising wages for everyone making under $60,000 a year. I'm hiring more nurses so you're not working double shifts. I'm replacing equipment that should have been retired a decade ago. And I'm implementing a patient care model that prioritizes outcomes over billing. Someone raised their hand, a young doctor. How are you paying for all this? Fair question. I'm taking a salary of $1 a year until we're profitable. Every executive is taking a pay cut. We're renegotiating our pharmaceutical supply contracts to cut costs by 40%. And we're cutting out the predatory middlemen who have been bleeding this hospital dry. Another hand. What do you need from us? Everything, I said honestly. I need you to believe this can work. I need you to care again. I need you to remember why you went into healthcare in the first place. I can't do this without you. The room was silent for a long moment. Then the older nurse in the front row stood up. When do we start? She asked. Right now. The transformation didn't happen overnight. But it happened. I worked alongside everyone. I sat in on emergency room shifts to understand patient flow. I scrubbed in on surgeries to see what equipment was failing. I ate in the cafeteria to understand what staff were dealing with. And most importantly, I negotiated directly with pharmaceutical manufacturers. This was the key, the thing that would eventually destroy Veyron Ashcroft. See, the way pharmaceutical distribution works is simple. Manufacturers make the drugs. Distributors like Veyron Industries buy in bulk and sell to hospitals at a markup. The markup is supposed to be reasonable to cover logistics and distribution costs. But Veyron had turned it into extortion. He would buy up supply of essential medications and create artificial scarcity. Then he would raise prices 300, 400, sometimes 500%. Hospitals had no choice but to pay because patients would die without the medications. I cut him out completely. I went directly to manufacturers, small, mid-sized companies that were being squeezed by distributors like Veyron. I negotiated contracts that were fair to both sides. I agreed to longer-term commitments in exchange for lower prices. I built relationships instead of extracting value. Within 6 months, our pharmaceutical costs dropped by 43%. We used the savings to hire staff. 32 new nurses across the 3 hospitals. 12 new doctors. Updated equipment in the emergency rooms. A new MRI machine. renovated patient rooms, and something incredible happened. When staff felt supported, they performed better. When patients received care in clean, modern facilities from doctors and nurses who weren't exhausted, outcomes improved. Mercy General's emergency room wait times dropped from 7 hours to 90 minutes. Lakewood's patient satisfaction scores went from 32% to 78% in 8 months. Riverside, the hospital that had been on the brink of closure, started breaking even. The local media noticed. Chicago Tribune sent a reporter. She spent a week embedded at Mercy General, watching how we operated. The story ran on the front page of the Metro section. Healthcare visionary resurrects dying hospitals. There was a photo of me in the emergency room, talking to a patient. The article detailed everything we had done: the staff investment, the direct pharmaceutical negotiations, the patient-centered care model. It quoted the older nurse from that first meeting. Her name was Patricia. She had been a nurse for 31 years. Dr. DeVeris didn't just save this hospital, Patricia said in the article. She reminded us why we became nurses. She gave us our purpose back. That article changed everything. Other hospitals started calling. How are you getting pharmaceutical costs so low? Who are you working with? Can you share your model? Insurance companies took notice. Started sending patients our way because our outcomes were good and our costs were reasonable. And pharmaceutical manufacturers started reaching out. Small companies that wanted to work with someone who wasn't trying to exploit them. Within a year, we acquired a 4th hospital, then a 5th. Davos Health Network was born. I hired carefully. Doctors who had been blacklisted for whistleblowing about unsafe practices at corporate hospitals. Nurses who had been pushed out for advocating for patients over profits. Administrators who believed healthcare was a calling, not a business. We built something beautiful. And Veyron Ashcroft had no idea what was coming. But I never forgot. Every time I signed a contract that cut out predatory distributors, I thought about him. Every time I walked through a hospital where staff smiled because they felt valued, I remembered his contempt. Every time a patient thanked me because they could afford their medication, I saw his face as he fired me over a paperweight. I wasn't just building a healthcare network, I was building a weapon. And I was patient because the thing about revenge is, it's not satisfying unless the person who wronged you understands exactly what they lost. Veyron Ashcroft was about to learn that lesson, in the most devastating way possible. The first time Veyron Ashcroft heard the name DeVeris Health Network, he was in a quarterly board meeting. I wasn't there, obviously, but I heard about it later from someone who was. His chief operating officer, a man named Gerald Strauss, was presenting the quarterly revenue report. We're down 8% from last quarter, Gerald said. We've lost several major contracts. Veyron apparently didn't even look up from his phone. Which contracts? 3 hospitals in Illinois, 2 in Texas. They've terminated their agreements and moved to independent suppliers. Now, Veyron paid attention. Which hospitals in Illinois? The ones in South Chicago. Mercy General, Lakewood Community, and Riverside Medical Center. They were acquired 18 months ago by some healthcare group. They're going direct to manufacturers now. Veyron frowned. Who acquired them? According to my notes, a woman, Dr. Seraphine DeVaris. She's been making some noise in the industry, built this whole patient-centered care model, negotiating directly with pharmaceutical companies, cutting out distribution networks. The board member who told me this said Veyron's jaw tightened slightly, but he didn't recognize the name. Not yet. Find out who she's working with, Veyron said, and make sure our remaining contracts know that going independent comes with consequences. That was February. By March, 6 more hospitals had left Veyron Industries. By April, the number was 12. I was systematically dismantling his client base. But I wasn't doing it through aggression. I was doing it through excellence. Every hospital that joined the Devaris Health Network got access to our pharmaceutical contracts, our operational expertise, our patient care models, and they got something else: freedom from predatory pricing. A hospital administrator from Texas called me in April. Her name was Dr. Yolanda Chen. She ran a small rural hospital that served a low-income community. "Dr. Devaris," she said, "I just want to thank you. We've been getting crushed by pharmaceutical costs for years. Veyron Industries kept raising prices, and we had no choice but to pay. Your model is saving us, which means we can save our patients. That's all that matters," I told her. She hesitated. "I should warn you, though. Veyron Industries is not taking this well. My rep called me yesterday and said if we don't renew our contract, they'll make sure we have trouble sourcing critical medications." "Did he put that in writing?" I asked. "Number? He's too smart for that." "Record all future calls," I said, "and send me any documentation of threats or coercion. I'm building a file." Because I wasn't just stealing Veyron's clients. I was gathering evidence. Every hospital administrator who left Veyron Industries had a story about price gouging, about threats, about artificial shortages created to drive up costs, about patients who died because they couldn't afford medications that cost pennies to produce. I documented everything. Meanwhile, the Devaris Health Network kept growing. By summer, we had 12 hospitals across Illinois and Texas. We were in negotiations for facilities in New York and Florida. The media loved the story: David versus Goliath, a female healthcare visionary taking on the pharmaceutical distribution industry. I did interviews. Carefully, strategically, I talked about patient-centered care, about the broken healthcare system, about the need for reform. I never mentioned Veyron Ashcroft by name. Not yet, but I made sure to talk about predatory middlemen who prioritized profits over patients, about distribution companies that created artificial scarcity, about the need for accountability, and people listened. Patient advocacy groups started reaching out. "Can you speak at our conference? Can you testify at this state legislative hearing? Can you help us understand why medication costs are so high?" I said yes to everything. I became a voice. Not the cleaning lady Veyron had thrown away. Not the disgraced doctor who had lost everything. Dr. Seraphine Devaris, healthcare reformer, CEO of a rapidly growing network that was proving you could provide excellent care without exploiting patients. My mother's nursing facility called in June. "Dr. Devaris, I wanted to let you know that your mother has been moved to our premium care wing. All expenses covered. It's the least we can do given your contributions to healthcare reform." I visited her that weekend. She was in a beautiful room with windows overlooking a garden. She had round-the-clock nursing care, physical therapy, cognitive therapy. She didn't fully recognize me. The dementia had progressed too far. But when I held her hand and told her we were rebuilding what we had lost, she smiled. "My father would be proud," she whispered. I cried the whole drive back to Chicago. Not sad tears this time, determined tears, because I was doing this for them, for my father who had died believing we had failed, for my mother who had lost herself in grief. And yes, I was doing it to destroy the man who had kicked me when I was down. But mostly, I was doing it because it was right. The system was broken, and I was fixing it. One hospital at a time, one patient at a time, one predatory contract terminated at a time, and then, in August, I made my move. I filed a federal lawsuit against Veyron Industries, charges, price gouging, anti-competitive practices, market manipulation, violations of the Sherman Antitrust Act. I had documentation, emails from hospital administrators detailing threats, pricing data showing 400% markups on essential medications. Testimony from pharmaceutical manufacturers about Veyron's coercive tactics. I had everything. How the lawsuit made national news. Major healthcare network sues pharmaceutical distributor for price gouging. That's when Veyron Ashcroft finally paid attention. That's when he finally looked up my name. That's when he finally saw my face and realized exactly who I was. The phone call came at 11:30 at night. I was in my office at Mercy General reviewing patient outcome data. My direct line rang. "This is Dr. Tavares. You have no idea what you're doing." The voice was cold, controlled, furious. I knew it immediately. "Mr. Ashcroft," I said calmly. "I was wondering when you'd call." Silence. Then, "You're the cleaning lady." I smiled. I was. "You fired me for moving a paperweight. Do you remember that?" More silence. "You told me I was replaceable," I continued. "You told me mediocrity had no place in your building. You threw me out like garbage because I had the audacity to touch your precious crystal while cleaning your office. That lawsuit is going nowhere," he said, his voice tight. "My lawyers will bury you in motions. This will never see the inside of a courtroom. It's already been filed in federal court. Discovery has begun. And I have 23 hospital administrators willing to testify about your business practices. This is a vendetta," he spat. "Personal revenge because you're bitter about being fired." "No," I said. "This is accountability. This is about the thousands of patients who died because you made essential medications unaffordable. This is about the hospitals you bled dry. This is about a system you exploited for profit while people suffered." I paused. The fact that you destroyed my dignity over a paperweight just made it personal. "There's a difference. You don't know who you're dealing with." "Actually, I do. I've spent the last 18 months studying you. Your business model, your contracts, your tactics. I know exactly who you are, Veyron. You're a predator who got rich off human suffering, and I'm going to make sure everyone else knows it too." He hung up. 3 days later, his lawyers filed a motion to dismiss. My lawyers were ready. We had anticipated every argument. The motion was denied. A week after that, Veyron's public relations team went on the offensive. Suddenly, there were articles raising questions about my past. The malpractice scandal in New York. The hospitals my family had lost. Suggestions that I was unstable, vindictive, using my current position to wage a personal war. I expected it. I called a press conference. 50 reporters showed up. Every major outlet, national news networks. I stood at the podium in a conference room at Mercy General. Behind me were 3 patients. A grandmother who needed insulin. A father whose daughter was a cancer survivor. A young man with cystic fibrosis. Yes, I was involved in a malpractice case in New York. A case that was later proven to be fabricated by a colleague who wanted my position. The real malpractice was the legal system that allowed someone to destroy a family's healthcare network with falsified evidence. I gestured to the patients behind me. But we're not here to talk about my past. We're here to talk about their present. Mrs. Kowalski behind me pays $40 a month for insulin through Tavares Health Network's pharmaceutical program. Under her previous plan with Veyron Industries pricing, she paid $412 a month. She had to choose between insulin and rent. I looked directly at the cameras. Mr. Torres's daughter had leukemia. The chemotherapy medication she needed cost $6,000 a month through traditional distribution channels. We provide it for $800. Same medication, same manufacturer. The only difference is we removed the predatory middleman. The room was silent. This lawsuit isn't about revenge. It's about revealing the truth. Veyron Industries has been systematically overcharging hospitals and patients for years. creating artificial shortages to drive up prices, threatening hospitals that try to negotiate better terms, and people have died because of it. I pulled out a folder. I have documentation of 87 patient deaths across 12 states that can be directly linked to inability to afford medications that Veyron Industries was distributing at inflated prices. 87 people who would be alive today if essential medications were priced fairly. A reporter raised her hand. Dr. Deveris, Veyron Industries is claiming this is personal. Is it? I smiled. A cold, terrible smile. Yes. It became personal when Veyron Ashcroft fired me from a cleaning job because I moved his paperweight 2 inches while scrubbing his floors. When he looked at me with complete contempt and told me I was replaceable. When he threw me out of his building without a second thought because I was invisible to him. I leaned forward, but here's what he didn't know. I wasn't just a cleaning lady. I was a doctor. A healthcare administrator, someone who had built and lost everything, someone who understood the system he was exploiting, and someone who would dedicate every resource I have to making sure he faces consequences for the damage he's caused. The cameras flashed, so yes, it's personal, but it's also right. And sometimes the most personal battles are the ones worth fighting. The press conference went viral. Within 24 hours, the video had been viewed 18 million times. Patient advocacy groups rallied. Hashtags trended. Other hospitals started coming forward with their own stories about Veyron Industries. The pressure became enormous. And then the investigation started. The Department of Justice opened an inquiry into pharmaceutical distribution practices. The Federal Trade Commission launched an antitrust investigation. 3 state attorneys general announced they were looking into price gouging complaints. Veyron's empire started cracking. His stock price dropped 32% in 2 weeks. Major investors started pulling out. Hospital contracts were canceled en masse, and through it all, I kept building. More hospitals joined the Deveris Health Network. More patients received affordable care. More healthcare workers found purpose again. I wasn't just destroying Veyron Ashcroft. I was proving there was a better way. Chapter 8. The Deposition. The deposition was scheduled for September 15th. Federal Courthouse in downtown Chicago, neutral ground. I arrived at 8 in the morning with Cassian and my lead attorney, a brilliant woman named Mira Okonkwo, who specialized in antitrust litigation. Veyron arrived with an army, 5 attorneys, 2 paralegals, a public relations consultant, and he looked smaller than I remembered. Not physically, but diminished, like the weight of consequences was finally pressing down on him. We sat across from each other in a sterile conference room. This was the first time we had been in the same room since the night he fired me. His lead attorney, a man with silver hair and a $7,000 suit, started the questioning. Dr. Deveris, can you state your full name and professional credentials for the record? Dr. Seraphine Devaris, medical degree from Johns Hopkins University School of Medicine, MBA from Wharton School of Business, currently CEO of Devaris Health Network. And prior to founding Devaris Health Network, what was your employment? I worked various positions while recovering from a professional setback. Retail, food service, janitorial services, he repeated. Can you elaborate? I was part of the evening cleaning crew at Veyron Industries' Chicago headquarters from August 2021 to November 2021. The attorney glanced at Veyron. And how did that employment end? I was fired by Mr. Ashcroft personally for moving a crystal paperweight approximately 2 inches out of place while dusting his desk. You could hear the tension in the room. Dr. Deveris, are you suggesting this lawsuit is motivated by personal vendetta rather than legitimate legal claims? I looked directly at Veyron. Not at all. This lawsuit is motivated by documented evidence of systematic price gouging, market manipulation, and anti-competitive practices that have resulted in patient harm and death. The fact that I have personal experience with Mr. Ashcroft's character, his cruelty, his complete lack of empathy for anyone he considers beneath him, simply confirmed what the evidence already showed. That a man who would fire someone over a paperweight with no concern for their sick mother would have no qualms about pricing essential medications out of reach for dying patients. I slid a folder across the table. These are internal emails from Veyron Industries discussing strategies to create artificial drug shortages to maximize profit margins. These are sworn testimonies from 17 hospital administrators, detailing threats made when they attempted to negotiate lower prices. This is pricing data showing markups of 300 to 500% on medications that cost less than $5 to manufacture. And this is a list of 87 documented patient deaths directly linked to inability to afford medications distributed by Veyron Industries at exploitative prices. The room went completely silent. Veyron finally spoke. His voice was low, dangerous. You have no idea what you've done. The pharmaceutical distribution industry is complex. You're going to collapse the entire supply chain. I smiled. No. I'm going to replace a broken, predatory system with one that actually serves patients. The supply chain will be fine. It's your profit margins that are going to collapse. You're destroying my company. You destroyed my life, I said quietly, over a paperweight. Without a second thought, you threw me out of your building in the middle of winter with $87 and told me I was replaceable. I leaned forward. Turns out, you were right. You are replaceable by a system that actually has a conscience. His attorney tried to intervene. Dr. Davaris, I must object to this line of, I cut him off. Let me make something very clear. This lawsuit is going to trial. The evidence is overwhelming. The Department of Justice is investigating. The Federal Trade Commission is investigating. 3 state attorneys general are investigating. Your company's stock has lost 40% of its value. Major investors are fleeing. Hospital contracts are being terminated daily. I locked eyes with Veyron. You're going to lose everything. Your company, your reputation, your legacy. And when you're sitting in whatever modest apartment you can afford after the judgments and settlements, I want you to think about that paperweight. I want you to remember the moment you decided a cleaning lady wasn't worth your basic human decency. Because that moment, that tiny, cruel, unnecessary moment is what set all of this in motion. The deposition lasted 6 more hours, but that moment was the turning point. Everyone in that room knew it. Veyron Ashcroft had fired the wrong person, and now he was going to pay for it. With everything he had. You know what the difference is between people who succeed and people who fail. It's not intelligence, it's not connections, it's character. It's how you treat people when you have power over them. If you're still watching this, if this story is hitting you the way I hope it is, I need you to do something. Leave a comment right now telling me one thing you're going to do differently after hearing this. How are you going to treat people with more dignity? Who are you going to see that you've been overlooking? Make that commitment public. And hit subscribe because the final chapters of this story are going to show you what justice really looks like. Don't just watch. Be changed by this. The trial lasted 6 weeks. 6 weeks of testimony that laid bare the rot at the heart of Veyron Industries. I sat in that courtroom every single day, front row, where Veyron could see me. The prosecution called 43 witnesses, hospital administrators who testified about threats they received when they tried to negotiate lower prices. We were told our supply lines would be cut off if we didn't accept the rate increases, said Dr. Marcus Bellamy from a hospital in Texas. We had cancer patients in active treatment. We had no choice. pharmaceutical manufacturers who detailed how Veyron Industries would buy up entire supplies of medications and then create artificial scarcity. They would purchase our full production run of essential cardiac medications, said a CEO from a mid-sized drug company. Then they would release it slowly to hospitals, claiming manufacturing delays. Meanwhile, prices would triple. We complained, but they had the contracts. We were locked in. Patients who had lost family members because they couldn't afford medications. A woman named Jennifer Alcott took the stand. She was 34. She testified about her father. "My dad was a diabetic," she said, her voice breaking. "He needed insulin to live. He had been managing his condition for 20 years. Then his insurance changed, and suddenly his copay went from $30 a month to $470 a month. Same insulin, same pharmacy, just a different distributor." She wiped her eyes. He tried to ration it. Took half doses to make it last. I didn't know until it was too late. I found him unconscious in his apartment. A diabetic ketoacidosis. He died 3 days later in the ICU. The courtroom was silent. He was 58 years old, she continued. He died because he couldn't afford medication that costs $7 to manufacture. The distributor was selling it for $470. That distributor was Veyron Industries. She looked directly at Veyron. "You killed my father for profit." Veyron's attorneys objected, called it inflammatory, prejudicial. The judge allowed the testimony because it was true. The evidence was overwhelming. Internal emails where Veyron executives discussed pricing strategies. One email, sent by Veyron himself, said, "Cancer patients are a captive market. They'll pay whatever we charge because the alternative is death. Maximize accordingly." Financial records showing profit margins of 600% on some medications. Recorded phone calls where Veyron Industries representatives threatened hospital administrators. Spreadsheets tracking which hospitals were most vulnerable to price increases based on their patient demographics and financial situations. It was systematic, calculated, evil. Veyron's defense tried to argue that this was standard industry practice, that every pharmaceutical distributor operated this way. That singling out Veyron Industries was unfair. My attorney destroyed that argument. "If everyone is committing the same crime," she said in her closing statement, "that doesn't make it legal. That makes it a conspiracy, and my client is here to end it." She turned to the jury. "Dr. Davaris built a healthcare network that proves you can provide excellent patient care, pay staff fair wages, maintain modern facilities, and still operate sustainably without exploiting dying patients. She cut pharmaceutical costs by 43% by simply removing the predatory middleman. Same medications, same manufacturers. The only difference is basic human decency." She gestured to Veyron. "The defense wants you to believe this is about business. It's not. It's about character. It's about a man who built a fortune by putting profit margins ahead of human lives, who created artificial scarcity of life-saving medications to drive up prices, who threatened hospitals that tried to negotiate fair terms, who fired a cleaning lady over a paperweight and never once considered that she might be a human being with a sick mother and a story that mattered." She paused. "This case is about accountability, about drawing a line and saying that some behaviors, no matter how profitable, are unacceptable in a civilized society. Your verdict will determine whether we continue to allow people to die for corporate profits, or whether we finally say enough." The jury deliberated for 3 hours and 47 minutes. I sat in the hallway outside the courtroom with Cassian. "You did it," he said quietly. "Regardless of the verdict, you exposed the truth." I shook my head. The verdict matters. If he walks away from this, nothing changes. He won't walk away. Trust me. The bailiff called us back in. The jury had reached a verdict. We filed back into the courtroom. I could feel my heart pounding so hard I thought everyone could hear it. The jury foreman stood, a woman in her 60s who had been a nurse before retiring. In the matter of Davos Health Network versus Veyron Industries, on the count of price gouging in violation of state consumer protection laws, we find the defendant guilty. I closed my eyes. On the count of market manipulation and anti-competitive practices in violation of the Sherman Antitrust Act, we find the defendant guilty. Veyron's face went pale. On the count of fraudulent business practices and conspiracy to defraud, we find the defendant guilty. Guilty on all counts. The judge set sentencing for 3 weeks later. But the verdict was just the beginning. Within hours, Veyron Industries' stock price collapsed, down 72% by market close. Major creditors called in loans. Institutional investors demanded emergency meetings. The board of directors convened that night and voted unanimously to remove Veyron as CEO. Criminal investigations were launched. The Department of Justice announced they were pursuing charges. Hospital contracts were terminated en masse. By the end of the week, Veyron Industries had lost 93% of its client base. The company filed for bankruptcy protection within 10 days. Everything Veyron had built over 20 years crumbled in less than 2 weeks. His personal assets were seized to pay judgments and settlements. The mansion in Lake Forest, the penthouse in downtown Chicago, the vacation home in Aspen, the art collection, the car collection, the yacht, all of it auctioned off. I attended the bankruptcy auction. I bought his Chicago headquarters building for $11 million. A fraction of its value. I had plans for it. Veyron Ashcroft, the man who had once commanded a pharmaceutical empire worth billions, was left with a modest condo and a legal defense fund that was rapidly depleting. I saw him one more time during this period. It was at a coffee shop near the courthouse. I was meeting with attorneys about the criminal trial. He was sitting alone at a corner table. No entourage, no assistants, just a man in an off-the-rack suit staring into a cup of coffee. He looked up and saw me. For a moment, neither of us moved. Then he stood and walked over to my table. My attorneys tensed, but I held up a hand. "Dr. Davos," he said. His voice was different, smaller, defeated. "Mr. Ashcroft, I want you to know," he started, then stopped. Struggled. "I didn't remember you the night I fired you. I genuinely didn't remember you when your name first came up. You were just," he paused, "invisible to me. I know. I've been trying to figure out how many other people I made invisible. How many lives I disrupted or destroyed without even noticing." He looked at me with something that might have been remorse. "I'm not asking for forgiveness. I don't deserve it. I just wanted you to know that I understand now. What I did, who I was." I studied his face, saw the weight of consequences in the lines around his eyes. "Do you remember Jennifer Alcott?" I asked. He frowned. "Who?" "The woman who testified about her father. The diabetic who died because he couldn't afford insulin that your company was selling for $470. "I don't," he admitted. "Exactly. That's the problem, Veyron. You destroyed lives and you don't even remember their names. You were so focused on profit margins and market shares that actual human beings became invisible to you." I stood up. "I was invisible to you. Jennifer's father was invisible. The thousands of patients who suffered because of your greed were invisible. You only see us now because we made ourselves impossible to ignore." I paused. "I hope you spend whatever time you have left trying to remember the names and faces of the people you hurt, because they deserve to be seen, even if it's too late to matter." I walked away. I didn't look back. The grand opening of Davos Medical Center was on a Saturday in November, exactly 3 years after Veyron Ashcroft had fired me. The building that had once housed Veyron Industries headquarters had been completely transformed. Where there had been executive offices and conference rooms, there were now patient care floors. Where there had been a lobby designed to intimidate, there was now a welcoming atrium with natural light and comfortable seating. Where there had been a monument to corporate greed, there was now a state-of-the-art community hospital. The symbolism wasn't lost on anyone. 2,000 people attended the opening. Staff from all 12 Davaris Health Network hospitals, patients whose lives had been changed, community members, local officials, national media. I stood at the podium in the main atrium and looked out at the faces. 3 years ago, I said, I stood outside this building in the freezing cold, holding a final paycheck for $87, wondering how I was going to survive. I had just been fired from a cleaning job. I had a sick mother I couldn't afford to care for. I had lost everything that defined me. I paused. The man who fired me told me I was replaceable. That mediocrity had no place in his building. He looked at me with contempt because I had moved a crystal paperweight 2 inches while cleaning his desk. I gestured to the building around us. Today, this is my building. It's your building. It belongs to the community. And instead of being a monument to one man's greed, it's a place where people receive health care regardless of their ability to pay. Where staff are valued and supported. Where the goal is healing, not profit. The crowd applauded. But I'm not here to gloat about revenge. I'm here to talk about what this represents. This building is proof that there's a better way. That you can provide excellent health care without exploiting patients. That treating people with dignity, all people, regardless of their job title or bank account, isn't just morally right. It's good business. I saw Patricia, the nurse from Mercy General, in the front row. She was crying. We have 73 former Veyron Industries employees working here now, people who lost their jobs when the company collapsed. We hired them because they had skills we needed, and because being complicit in a broken system doesn't make you irredeemable, it makes you human, and humans deserve second chances. I took a breath. The lesson here isn't that bad people get punished. It's more complicated than that. The lesson is that how you treat people when you have power over them defines who you are. That cruelty, even small cruelty, has consequences. That making people invisible doesn't make them powerless. It just means you don't see the threat until it's too late. I looked directly at the cameras. Veyron Ashcroft treated me like I was invisible because I was cleaning his office. He never asked about my story, my education, my circumstances. I was just a uniform and a cart, and when I made a minor mistake, he threw me away without a second thought. I smiled. But invisible doesn't mean powerless, it just means unseen. And sometimes the people you don't bother to see are the ones who end up changing everything. After the ceremony, I walked through the hospital. The emergency room was already seeing patients. A young mother with her son who had a broken arm. An elderly man with chest pain. A teenager with asthma. All of them receiving care. No one being asked if they could pay before being treated. I stopped by the room that had been Veyron's office. It was now a consultation room where doctors met with patients to discuss treatment options. The crystal DNA paperweight sat on a shelf. I had kept it. Bought it at the auction of his personal items. Not as a trophy, as a reminder of how small moments of cruelty can cascade into revolution. Of how invisible people are only invisible until they're not. Of how character is revealed in how you treat those who can do nothing for you. Someone knocked on the door. I turned. It was a young woman in scrubs. A nurse I didn't recognize. Dr. Davos? I'm sorry to interrupt. She hesitated. I wanted to thank you For what? I was working at a hospital in Texas, corporate-owned. They were cutting staff, cutting services, maximizing profits. I was about to quit healthcare entirely. I couldn't reconcile what I was being asked to do with why I became a nurse. She smiled. Then I heard about what you were doing, about Davos Health Network. I applied, and you hired me. And for the first time in 3 years, I remembered why I went into nursing. To help people, not to generate revenue. She wiped her eyes. You gave me my purpose back. So thank you. I felt something warm spread through my chest, something I hadn't felt in a long time. Purpose. Thank you for being here, I told her, for caring. That's all that matters. And she nodded and left. I stood there for a moment looking at that paperweight. Then I walked down to the 4th floor, to the premium long-term care wing. My mother had been transferred here 2 weeks ago, the best care available. Round-the-clock nursing, physical therapy, memory care specialists. I found her in her room, sitting by the window. She looked peaceful. Hi, Mom, I said, pulling up a chair. She turned and looked at me. Her eyes were distant, the dementia having taken so much. But then she smiled. Seraphine, she said, my beautiful girl. Some days she knew me, some days she didn't. Today was a good day. I told you we'd rebuild, I said, taking her hand. Your father would be so proud, she whispered. I am too, I said. We sat in silence for a while, just holding hands. Everything I had done, the fighting, and the building, the destroying and creating. It all came back to this, to taking care of the people who couldn't take care of themselves, to building systems that served rather than exploited, to making sure that no one had to feel invisible ever again. Later that evening, I stood on the rooftop of Davos Medical Center. The Chicago skyline spread out before me, lights glittering in the darkness. Cassian found me there. Hell of a day, he said, standing next to me. Hell of a 3 years. He smiled. You know, when you called me that night, I knew you'd do something extraordinary. I just didn't know it would be this. I looked at him. You took a chance on someone who had nothing. I took a chance on someone who had everything that mattered. Vision, integrity, determination. The money was easy. What you did with it, that was all you. I thought about everything that had happened, the fall, the humiliation, the grinding climb back up, the moment of victory. Do you think he learned anything? Cassian asked. Veyron. I don't know, maybe, or maybe he's just sorry he got caught. Does it matter? I considered this. No, I finally said. This was never really about him. It was about proving that a better system is possible, that you don't have to exploit people to succeed, that dignity matters. I looked out at the city. He was just the obstacle I had to remove to prove it. What's next? Cassian asked. More hospitals, more communities, more proof that healthcare can be about healing instead of profit. He nodded. I'm in, for as long as you're doing this. We stood there in comfortable silence, and I thought about that night 3 years ago. Standing in the cold, like holding a paycheck for $87, feeling like my life was over. I had been so wrong. My life wasn't ending. It was just beginning. The most important chapter had started the moment I decided to stop being invisible. The moment I decided to fight back. The moment I remembered who I really was. Not a cleaning lady, not a victim, Dr. Seraphine Davos, builder of systems, destroyer of injustice, and proof that the people you step on while climbing might just be the architects of your destruction. So let me leave you with this. Every single person you encounter has a story, has dignity, has value. The server bringing your food, the janitor cleaning your office, the cashier ringing up your groceries, the delivery driver dropping off your packages. They all have lives, struggles, dreams, histories. and how you treat them, especially when they can do nothing for you, when they're in positions you consider beneath you, that reveals who you really are. Not your job title, not your bank account, not your accomplishments, your character. Veyron Ashcroft failed that test spectacularly. He saw people as invisible when they were actually just unseen. And that mistake cost him everything. Don't make the same mistake. See people, all people. Treat them with dignity, because today's cleaning lady might be tomorrow's CEO. Today's invisible person might be tomorrow's unstoppable force. And karma? Karma never forgets. It just waits for the perfect moment to balance the scales. If this story changed something in you, if you're going to walk out of here and treat people differently, I need to know. Drop a comment right now. Tell me one specific thing you're going to do differently. Who are you going to see that you've been overlooking? How are you going to show up with more dignity and respect? Make that commitment public. And subscribe to Cedar Drama, because we're going to keep telling stories that challenge you, change you, and remind you of what really matters. Don't just be entertained, be transformed. That's what this channel is about. That's what this story was for. Now, go out there and prove that you learned the lesson. See people. Value people. Because everyone, and I mean everyone, deserves to be seen. Until next time, this is Cedar Drama, where every story leaves you different than it found you.